I gotta tell you guys, as Gaethje and Khabib gets closer, I have to talk about it a lot. Not only do I enjoy talking about it to you guys, but then outside of it, I go over to ESPN or something or do an interview somewhere, and I gotta give a breakdown of the X's and O's of the fight. I gotta tell you, there's never been an easier fight to break down. Because I don't need to now come with my opinion. I don't need to go back and study tape, start to break it down and take notes. I don't have to do that. All I have to do is quote these guys. Okay, Justin Gaethje has openly said, if I get taken down, bad news. I get my back pushed up against the fence, bad news. If I kick him 4 times properly, I change the fight. He's right on all of those. There is no gamesmanship there. That is a straightforward answer of the goods and the bads, what he needs to do, what he needs to avoid. Khabib has now come out. Khabib said, look, nothing changes for Gaethje. He says, I go out there, I wrestle. I'm going to shoot 1 time. If it doesn't work, I'm going to shoot a 2nd time. If it doesn't work, I'm going to shoot a 3rd and 4th time. He's right. And the one thing that the great wrestlers in MMA do is what's called a reshot. Many guys will shoot 1 time, fail, and stop. Maybe they can put a 2nd attack together. But look, guys, in good wrestling, that first shot only gets you close. The 2nd shot gets you in position. The 3rd shot is what gets the takedown. It's called a reshot. But from the wrestling world, this doesn't just happen. This has to be trained. It is not natural. It is extremely draining. It is a lot of energy, and it is one of the things that makes Khabib so successful. He said, of course I'm going to box with him. Of course I'm going to throw some kicks in there. And he said, I do think that Justin Gaethje is a very good wrestler. He said, but in the last 5 years, I don't think he's used his wrestling. I use mine every time I go into the cage. I believe right now I can out-wrestle him. Now, Khabib is correct in many ways. Khabib is correct that Justin Gaethje is not as good of a wrestler as he used to be. That's true. Justin did get away from it. He was an 5th best wrestler in all of America at one point in his life. He has gotten away from it in one regard, which is offensively. He has traded the wrestling offense for Muay Thai and kickboxing offense. Defensively, Gaethje's as good as he's ever been. And that is one thing that people miss. A lot of people criticize Justin Gaethje for not wrestling more. Or they just ask him simply, why don't you wrestle more? Now, he's answered the question. He said, I find wrestling to be more tiring. I find it to be less energy to punch and kick. The fans appear to like that. I've got some bonuses for it. I've won some fights doing it. This is what I'm going to do offensively. I can live with that answer. But you do have to understand how good his defenses are. And if you have a great stand-up game and Justin's is flat great, as long as you can keep it and you can choose the realm that the fight is in, that's enough. Right? That's the same thing that Khabib does. Khabib's fine on his feet, but he can control where the fight is, at least up until this match. It's going to be very interesting. Very interesting if he can get on top of Justin, because if he gets on top of Justin, that's not where it ends. Everybody Khabib has ever taken down has been a grappling guy. And maybe they added some wrestling, but they were grappling, which means they fight on the mat, right? They're going to play this game, which never works. They're going to play the game trying to find a submission, which it just doesn't work. In the eyes of the judges. It just doesn't. Well, I was more offensive. More offensive from your back? That argument has been tried and tested since 1993. It's never held up. I'm only sharing that with you because Justin Gaethje, should he be taken down, he's not going to be pulling guard or looking for half guard. It's going to be a totally another animal. He's going to roll over to his knees, which they tell you in grappling you shouldn't do. He's then going to stand up to his feet, push his hips forward, turn to face him. He's going to create a scramble. It's going to be a very different fight. Going to be a very different fight from an output standpoint. Justin Gaethje is not going to wilt. Khabib makes guys wilt. I'm just predicting that for it. Gaethje's not going to wilt, and he's not going to stay underneath him. At least not by choice. If Khabib is good enough to hold him down, okay. But that's not what Khabib's trained in. International wrestling, Khabib coming from Dagestan, Russia. Superstars in wrestling, but they're superstars in international wrestling, which is unique to a style called either Greco-Roman or freestyle. The one thing that is different from international wrestling as opposed to American wrestling, only America, only country in the world does something called collegiate or folk style, which is what Justin Gaethje was 5th in. The reason that American wrestlers have succeeded in MMA to a level that foreign wrestlers never have is because American wrestlers are awarded for 2 things. Holding a guy down against his will and getting up and getting yourself free against the other guy's will. In international wrestling, Olympic style wrestling, freestyle and Greco-Roman, that's not part of it. You won't get a point. You won't be rewarded. You will never work on that technique in your life. You could win the Olympic championship and you will not even be introduced to those positions. This is very relevant and wrestlers are going to know what I'm talking about. So While Khabib is right on Justin's offensive wrestling, that it is not as sharp as it once was, I have to push back and tell you his defense is as sharp as it ever was. I don't know the answer to scrambling. I know that Justin grew up doing this. I know when he was a collegiate, he was great at it. I know he was rewarded for getting up off the bottom. He was rewarded for holding somebody down. Khabib never had that in his entire life. The question is still very relevant. Much like the shot-reshot example I gave you a moment ago, not getting up off the bottom is also a tool that you will lose if you don't keep it sharp. Gaethje being in the room with Kamaru Usman leads me to believe that Gaethje has been taken down. The question is, does he stay there or does he scramble to get up? Old Justin Gaethje scrambles to get up. And the reason I have to say old, he'd never been taken down. Justin Gaethje hasn't had to do this in MMA. We haven't seen them do this. Again, back to my original premise that his defense is so damn good, he doesn't get in that position. He's going to be in that position more than likely. More than likely, more than one time. Is he going to scramble or is he going to try to hold Khabib, wait for the ref to break it and throw the round away? That was Conor McGregor's strategy. Conor openly talked about that after the fight. My goal was to not get taken down, understand it if I did, cling tight, don't do damage, wait till the bell rings. Not a good way to win a decision, not a great strategy by Conor's own admittance. Where is Justin going to go with those scrambles? How many of those offensive attacks can Khabib put together? These are the real questions here. I don't think that any of us are willing to walk to the window and put a bet down that this fight ends by submission. I don't think many of us are willing to go to the window and believe that this ends by knockout. This is likely a long, drawn-out battle. If there's a stoppage, it's a TKO where one guy is held in a position after an all-out war and can't defend himself and the ref has to step in. And most likely, and the Vegas window does agree with me, this is going 5 rounds. This largely is going to be about position. Most fights that go 5 rounds ultimately come down to who contained and controlled more positions. Gaethje's a wild man. He's not going to be looking for that. Khabib, more composed, is going to look for that. Who can impose their will? It's a very interesting fight that wouldn't have been as interesting a year ago. It is not. This fight would not be as interesting had we not seen the Justin Gaethje that we saw fight Tony Ferguson. That changed everything.